So I've opened the gates and to allow people to start joining. And it's always interesting considering how truly global our sessions are. We always have people joining us in different parts of the world. And as you can see already, people are already joining us. And it's always impressive and very, very encouraging.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, to see that, to see people join us from across the world. And as you can see, we are going to really have an amazing time. It's always an amazing time every time we have these sessions. So, and on that note, I think we can start the show. So, hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Paul Adepoju, and I'm the community manager for the Pamela International Center for Journalists Pamela Howard Forum on Global Crisis Reporting. And I'm really glad that you can join us today on this special webinar as part of Empowering the Truth Summit. And we've discussed different subjects. We've highlighted different topical issues that are of relevance to journalists in different parts of the world. And the goal of these series of webinars is to empower you with the skills, tools, resources, insights, and several other things that you need to be able to empower your truth journalism and let truth go viral. We know truth continues to be put on the proverbial cross in these days, and it's much easier for misinformation to go viral, and which is why we are embarking on this journey to guide journalists, content creators, and several others that are in this space to be able to actually actively engage and better position their content. So I'd like to welcome you, as I always do. If you are part of this show, if you've been on previous webinars before, you know how we like to engage with you. So please go to the chat box and let us know where you are joining us from. And let us have that engaging interaction. And if you have specific question for our host, for our guest today that I will be introducing next, please do let us have that questions right on time so that we can address them as much as possible. And that said, allow me to introduce our guest today, who will be leading this session, is Professor Paul Bradshaw. So today we are having two Pauls on this session. It's from Birmingham City University. Hi, Paul. How are you doing? And say hello to our truly global participants.
Yes, it's a fantastic range of people. I'm looking at this number, and I've got that desire to kind of get it above 100. That'd be fantastic. And so good afternoon, yes, and good morning if it's morning where you are. Good night if it's good evening if it's night where you are. Yeah.
Yes, so thank you very much. And so if you've seen the promotion already, I know you already know what we are discussing today. Today, we'll be taking a look at data, visual storytelling, and something that a lot of you will also be interested in, which is on journalism. And so like you are already aware, we are holding these sessions in different time zones globally. And if you notice very well, depending on where you are joining us from, it may be morning, afternoon, evening, or right in the midnight. So really appreciate it. So the goal for today's session is data, visual storytelling, and meme journalism, which is, we hope at the end of this session, you'll be empowered with the right skills for you to actually be able to better position your content. And I also want to say good welcome to our participants that are watching this live stream on Facebook. And you can also engage with us if you have questions using the comment box below the Facebook video that you are watching right now. So that said, I think we should get this show started. And Paul, do you want to take the lead from me and just guide our participants on this journey? And before Paul start that journey, I think I also want to let you know that we always have lots of questions to address. So please do not wait until the end of the presentation for your questions. Use the Q&A already if you have your questions already. And I always like interacting with you too. So if you like to go live with your question, just raise your hand using the hand raise options on Zoom. And yes, Paul, we are ready for your session. Take it from here.
Thank you very much. I'll switch to my slides. Hopefully everyone can see those. Obviously, we're here to talk about visual storytelling, and really I would describe this as not just a new language in use, but actually language is plural, and I'll go through and tell you a little bit more what I'm talking about that. To begin with, I'm going to talk about why I'm actually here, why I'm talking about this particular subject, why it's relevant now. Then I'll spend most of the session talking about some of these different languages that I'm referring to. So things like GIFs, things like emojis, things like memes. And I'll talk about some practical tips around tools that you can use to become more visual, and techniques as well, conceptual techniques as well. So let's begin with why we're talking about this now. We all know that visuals are incredibly effective on social media. Really, social media has been a big driver of the growth of visual journalism and visual storytelling. This image, it's no coincidence that it's an image, is from Twitter's own agency playbook about just how much people focus on visuals on that particular platform. We've also obviously got some specifically visual social media platforms. The big growth about 10 years ago, when we had Instagram, when we had Pinterest, things like that, was towards visual platforms. But journalism has always been visual, and in fact, about 100 years ago, it's about a century now since photojournalists became an identifiable group within the industry. There was actually a period of time when there was debate around whether photography could be considered journalism. There was a battle for authority around whether photojournalists should be treated like other journalists. And of course, we're seeing similar sorts of debates now around modern visual journalism. Does someone who creates maps and charts, are they a journalist? If someone creates memes or GIFs or uses emojis, are they a journalist? Well, there are many journalists already employed specifically with those jobs. So we have old techniques. We have photos, diagrams, maps and charts. Those have been used in news outlets for decades, but actually we've now got new contexts to those old techniques. So yes, we've always used photos, but we now need to think about square ratio. If we're publishing on something like Instagram, we're thinking about vertical ratio. We're thinking about multiple images in a sequence. We're thinking about interactivity. We're thinking about different platforms. So even with things like charts, we need to be thinking not just about how that chart is going to work in a story, but actually when it's separated from that story, intentionally or not, does it work? Is it self-contained? So one thing we should always be thinking about whenever I talk to my students about data visualization is you always have to assume that the chart you create will be screenshotted and shared outside of that story. And anyway, you should be doing that yourself as well. You should be thinking about how you tell stories visually outside of the story itself. Aside from those traditional techniques, you also have emoji, you have GIFs, you have memes as well. And I'm going to talk through each of those in turn. And finally, I'm going to talk about text as something that can be visual, how often we turn text into visual elements as well. And I've used VisJo here, which sometimes is used as a shorthand for visual journalism, just in case you're wondering what that means. So let's start with the photos, the diagrams, the maps and the charts, the old techniques. Well, there has been some research within the BBC, within other organisations, into what types of images work best on Instagram in particular. Faces, not surprisingly, tend to perform particularly well. Images that tell part of a story do well. Images that surprise or shock, create an emotional reaction, they can be quite a good choice as well. So if you're looking to pick an image for Instagram, think about some of these dimensions. Think about the feel-good factor, positivity. That can work particularly well on social media. I think one of the big changes in the last 10 years has been a realization that it's not just bad news that sells. Actually, good news is something that people really want to hear more about. People, places, movement, these all work really well on social. What you don't want to be doing is film posters, for example. This is National Geographic. Their Instagram page, frankly, is quite boring. If you're repurposing material from elsewhere, poster material, things like that, then really start to think about how social media is different. It's obviously a smaller screen, it's more personal, and it's an environment that's more informal, where your material is being mixed with personal material as well. Now, you're probably familiar with the rule of thirds. This is a rule about composing images in photography. Most of the examples you see will be from landscape photography, landscape ratio images, but this applies in vertical as well. These two images are from a book I wrote called Snapchat for Journalists, and they're screenshots from two Snapchat videos. The image on the left you can see is well composed. The shot is well composed. They've got the subject right where those lines intersect, and that's what you want in the rule of thirds. The image on the right doesn't, and as a result, you're staring at this man's mouth. Now, increasingly, we're seeing much more variety in composition, and you'll have seen in online video and online TV and in still images, a move away from the rule of thirds towards other compositional guides. Symmetrical images and looking directly at the camera are becoming increasingly common. I think that's an influence of YouTubers apart from anything else. So you can use different types of composition to make your images stand apart. And images are increasingly sequential as well. Instagram introduced the carousel feature a few years ago. This meant that as well as just uploading one image, you could actually upload a sequence of images and people could swipe through them. Now, Snapchat stories work on the same basis. You tap to advance. Likewise, Instagram stories and other similar formats. So it's not necessarily now just about thinking about one good image, but actually, do you have a sequence of images that can tell a story? And when you get into sequences, you're starting to think about narrative structure. What's your beginning? What's your middle? What's your end? And obviously, the example here, the pudding, which is particularly good at doing this on Instagram. These are graphic images, graphics rather than graphic images. Quite often with a bit of text in there, almost more like a slideshow. So you can use these approaches as well to tell visual stories on social media. So think not just about the single image, but a sequence of image and the ordering, the narrative structure that you create through that. And look at lots of examples to get ideas. Like I say, the pudding is a really good one to look at. But I'm going to move away from those traditional techniques, maps, photos, charts, because most of what I want to talk about are the new techniques, emojis, GIFs, and memes. And let's start with emojis. You might be thinking, oh, emojis, this just trivializes the news. It's flippant. It's kind of how young people speak or something like that. There's a useful cognitive bias to introduce at this point, which is called false consensus effect. This is the the tendency that we have as humans to kind of believe that more people share our opinion than actually do. You might find emoji trivial, but the fact is, news organizations use them, consumers use them. They're used in a wide range of situations, and I'll show you lots of examples in a moment. These are the numbers of emojis used by different publishers based on a piece of research 5 years ago. That was 6 years ago, actually. 6 years ago, it was already widespread. The Financial Times uses emojis. The BBC uses emojis. They are absolutely mainstream now. Yes, you do need to be considerate of the tone of the story and the use of emoji, but that's no different to any other story in terms of being careful about your choice of words. We're just treating emojis in the same way as we do words. So here are some examples. In the top left there, we have a roundup of local election results using emojis to sum it up very succinctly. On the top right there, we have a fact file using emojis as bullet points, effectively, to kind of label each fact about this particular individual. And in the bottom left, we have an emoji used to encapsulate the emotional reaction of this piece of imagery. A couple more examples. On the left, this is actually a Snapchat story from the Toronto Star, where they've printed out emojis as a ratings system. So they're kind of rating different, I think it was pieces of fashion, using emojis to, again, convey an emotion. They've also got emojis on the story itself. And that's another area to consider the use of emojis if you're creating Instagram stories or Snapchat stories or other story formats. Most of these allow you to use emojis and text on top of the images or video that you're telling a story through. On the right, we have text alerts. Text alerts, probably one of the main places where you will find emojis routinely used. Also in email newsletter subject lines and email newsletters themselves, very common in newsletters too. And we can see here emojis used to convey, again, emotional reaction. In a couple of examples, actually the kind of actors in the story. So Cecil, the lion's son, shot dead in Zimbabwe. We have a lion emoji there representing the lion in that story, as well as a crying emoji to represent the emotional impact of that. So we can identify here a number of different functions that emojis can play in your storytelling. The first is a literal function. So the emoji can literally represent something in your story. It might be police in your story, represented by a police emoji. It might be a particular country that features. It might be an event such as a launch or a prize. If it's a data story, you often see a chart, a bar chart emoji used to indicate this is a story that has charts. So that's a very obvious literal option. And that's really a case of showing rather than telling in writing. We can also use it to convey the emotional impact, as we've seen. So setting up expectations about whether this is a sad story, a happy story, a story which is about a little bit of awkwardness, and so on. Sometimes you'll see people use emoji to label things. So you might use bullet points, as we did in the fact file. We can also use it in a similar way to turn text into an image. So the number 100, you could write that as a number in the text of your social update or your email newsletter title. But you can also use the emojis for 1 and 0 to kind of create that number using emojis. The information is the same, but it's just a useful way to emphasize that number or draw attention to it. The call to action emoji is quite an interesting one. So if you've got an arrow pointing down, that's effectively calling the reader to look down, or add this to your diary if you've got a pin or a calendar icon. Those are all ways of kind of drawing the attention to an action that you are kind of inviting someone to take. You can even create what's called a rebus. A rebus is a word made up of pictures. So like a wolf and an iceberg might represent Wolfsburg or something like that. Those are quite rare, but they can be quite fun. Now, the key thing with emojis, you may have seen there was a rash of use of emojis in experimentation a few years ago. What people have found through research is that generally just one or two emoji tends to be more effective than a whole bunch of them. So maybe just one at the start, or as a bullet list in a series, that can work well. A couple more examples to illustrate what I'm talking about here. In the upper left, you can see a couple of call to action emojis in this, so that the pin indicates basically kind of, make a note of this date, and the arrow means go and visit this link. So urging the audience to do particular things. And the example below it is more of a kind of a rebus. So an economist and a farmer walk into a bar, talk about Brexit, basically, is what that series of emoji represents. And they just agree on farming there. So that creates a little bit of a puzzle that can be quite fun when used effectively, and only in certain cases. Ed Conway at Sky News in the UK is quite a good user of emoji and threads in his storytelling, often data-driven storytelling. Obviously, the thread emoji itself is quite a useful one to be aware of. If you're going to do a thread, it sends out that signal that you're about to begin a sequential narrative, a series of tweets that are connected. But you can also see here examples of conveying the emotional impact of a story, the expectations, some literal use of emoji, so paint, cars, and so on. Flags to indicate location, bar charts to indicate content, a bride to indicate the subject of a story, a police car to indicate that this is a story about police, and so on. Again, some more literal examples here. And as a kind of a point to include here, be conscious of how the emojis might shape your appearance of impartiality or objectivity. This was a tongue-in-cheek tweet from a BBC News presenter, very topical, of course, right now, when the BBC introduced guidelines that mentioned that emojis can undercut an otherwise impartial post. Hugh Edwards here has littered his tweet with a bunch of Welsh flag emojis because he's Welsh, and he's kind of jokingly saying that he's, biased in that he's proud to be Welsh. But think about that impartiality and objectivity as well in terms of the impact of the emoji. And obviously the subject matter, whether it's appropriate, whether it works with the emojis that you're using. Now, I'll just pause there in case there's any questions. I can see quite a few. I'm trying to work out which order it is. Okay. Am I looking at the Q&A? Oh, no, that's okay. I'm looking in the chat.
No, I think at the presentation, we'll take all the questions, Paul.
Okay. So I'll carry on, just having checked that. Let's move on then to GIFs. GIFs, I think, are a really interesting technique in terms of really introducing motion into your, not just your social media updates. Here's one example from social media, but also actually in stories and on homepages of websites. These have been used right across all of those. And what it does is effectively, it makes me think of if anyone has seen the Harry Potter films. In the Harry Potter films, there's a newspaper that the wizards read called the Daily Prophet. And in the Daily Prophet, the pictures move on that newspaper. They behave in, they basically are GIFs. And that's where we are now. We are working for the Daily Prophet. We have this ability to not just include still images, but looping images that represent something that we want to communicate in our story. So on the left, we have a story about violence at a football match, and we have a looping GIF. Sometimes it's a looping video, but it has the appearance of a GIF that shows a key event or a couple of events from that story. On the right is a story about fighting technique, looking at a couple of fighters, and each point that the story is relating to, so each section where it's talking about different techniques, it's got a little GIF illustrating that technique. So it can, like I said, it can introduce motion without you having to have a full-blown video that someone has to play. And as with visuals, GIFs also have a significant effect on engagement, on Twitter in this case, and on social media more general. And GIFs are part of viral techniques. Emojis are as well. Some of the other techniques are as well. Generally, visual storytelling, like online video in many ways, has kind of been pioneered by viral storytelling. And we have kind of, as journalists, as professional storytellers, have started to learn different ways that we can tell stories. So this is an example of a fact-checking initiative which looked at checking misinformation around COVID. And they made this statement a couple of years ago that not using these techniques is like bringing a knife to a gunfight. You know, you're really not fighting on the same platform. All you're really doing is making yourself feel better and more serious and adult by not engaging with an audience. So there are 5 ways you can create a GIF. We've seen, you know, there are GIFs you can just find from repositories. So when you go on Twitter, for example, and create a tweet, you can add a GIF, and there's a library there which is supplied by Giphy. It's the same on Telegram and WhatsApp, where you can pick from existing GIFs. These are often used to express emotion, for example. You can adapt some of these as well. So you can actually take some of these GIFs and you can add new text on top using some tools I'll come on to later. But I think where this gets interesting is if you have a video, for example, you can create a clip from that as a GIF, which makes that video a little bit more accessible, a little bit more impactful on social media. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. You can also do this from existing YouTube videos as well, but I think taking it from your own video is where it gets interesting. Another technique you can use to create a GIF is to take a sequence of images and convert that to a GIF using some of the tools I'll come on to later. That's what I did at the start of this presentation. There's you might have noticed in the very first slide, there was a looping GIF in the background of some memes. And then you can do screen capture as well. So you can capture interaction with a story or scrolling down a story and turn that into a GIF as well. And of course, these can work on social media, they can work in listicles, they can work in email newsletters as well. So this is an example of using a GIF from a library. This is a story about data on the best cities for pet owners. And we've just got a GIF of a cat with its head stuck in a loaf of bread or a slice of bread. So it's a little bit fun and it's quick to do. You've just searched the GIF library for cat or something like that. As I said, often these will be used to convey expectation. What type of emotion is this story about? That's another way you might use a GIF. Is this surprising? Is it shocking? Is it sad? Is it admirable? Is it about something heroic? Is it about something tragic? But here's an example of taking a clip from your own video. This is a story about France winning the World Cup and how fans reacted at a particular pub in Birmingham. So this person has recorded the full footage on video, but to share this on social, she's just captured a key clip from that and used that as a GIF on social. Now, I'm going to come out of these slides to show you these next ones. So I'll disappear for a moment before I reshare. And I think you can see this. So this is a story. I'll show you the actual story as well. Here we go. In fact, let's click through to it here. So this is the story. And as you scroll through, you'll see this satellite image is kind of new annotations are added. This is by one of my students, Federico Reynes. And to tell that story on social, we've captured a number of kind of screenshots of how that image looks at different points and turned that into a GIF as a way of conveying to the audience an abridged version of what you can expect on this story, what you're going to get on this story. Oh. Another example. Mel Sanchez. This is, again, from the article itself, you've got a map where things change over a period of time. So different things are happening over a period of time. And each of these date stamps, each of these different points in time where this map has a snapshot of the data, those can be strung together into a GIF to give you a story of sequence, again, something changing over time. Now, let me, I'm going to bring up a couple more so I'm not constantly skipping. And I'll show you some more as well. So here's another one. This is a slider that's in the story where you can slide to see kind of before and after or with and without. Again, just capture that interaction with the story as a screen capture and then convert it to a GIF. Essentially, this is a video that's been converted into a GIF, and you can create a video of a screen capture on using tools like QuickTime, for example. One from Tom Carver at the Times, a story about tax, an interactive about tax. Again, they've just interacted with that story, with this kind of calculator here, and then captured that and turned it into a GIF. So you can see what you're going to be able to do if you click through to the article. And this is a story from Reuters Graphics, from their team. This is a piece of scrolly telling. So as you scroll down the story, different things happen, different things are drawn. And that beautiful action, it's a lovely piece of scrolly telling, again, is captured through screen capture and turned into a GIF. Bar chart races, animated charts are really good for this. So this was a story on how different age groups were being affected by COVID, and turned into a bar chart race. So you could see how that changed over time, how one particular age group suddenly became much more affected than others. Just play that bar chart race, capture it, and bar chart races work brilliantly on social media, and they can work brilliantly as an embedded GIF within a story as well. Now, if you're looking to do animations, Flourish is quite useful for this, for the data visualization tool Flourish. It has animated charts like the bar chart race option, but it also has something called stories. And with a story, what you can do is create 2 or more charts, and it will animate the transition from one to another. So in this example, I've created one chart showing the numbers of people waiting for treatment on the health service between May 2020 and March 2021. I've then created another chart that shows the same data, but going back much longer. And when you put those 2 charts together into a story and you click from one to the next, it will animate like so. So this can be quite useful to create an animation where perhaps it's not possible within the chart itself. Okay. Let's go back to the full slides. And I'm going to move on now from memes to, from GIFs, sorry, to memes. Now, memes fascinate me because memes, first of all, let's define what we mean by a meme. The term meme was really kind of coined in the 1970s and generally meant any sort of idea that becomes widespread or popular in some way. So certain words can be memes, certain dances can be memes, fashions can be memes. But when we talk about it now, what we generally mean is an internet meme. So something that is presented as an image or a GIF or something like that, that has accumulated some sort of meaning through being used multiple times. So this is a meme, this particular image with "What if I told you" at the top. It comes from a film which people may or may not have seen, but it has a currency outside of people who've seen that film. And it taps into a shared understanding around a particular series of conventions around, for example, this is around the idea of something that's going to be shocking. But generally, there is a kind of a narrative structure to a lot of memes, which is an image, a piece of text across the top, and a piece of text across the bottom. And the piece of text across the top is the setup. The piece of text across the bottom is the twist or the punchline. So we've already got a kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end actually within this type of story, this type of visual. And once you start to understand that, you can start to use that to tell stories in a way that is, again, very punchy, very succinct, very distinctive. And again, this has been used a lot in fact checking in situations where you're trying to counter narratives that are using these sorts of techniques themselves. It's also been used to encourage participation from audiences. This is a really interesting project around pollution in China, where partly because of censorship, they invited people to kind of communicate through memes, to share their experiences through memes. The other thing about inviting people to do this is that it's more fun than simply asking them to, share accounts. And it taps into a creativity that's already there in your audience. And it relies on a knowledge of the possibilities. It relies on a knowledge of particular images that can convey particular types of stories, particular types of narratives. So this particular image, it's known as Success Kid or I Hate Sandcastles, if you really kind of study your memes. This has been around for quite a long time. There's actually a whole website called Know Your Meme with loads of these collected. And so this is kind of expressing a a certain amount of reward or pleasure. So if you know that, you know to reach for that image if you're going to try to tell a story about that sort of event. You might be familiar with Disaster Girl. This is an image of a girl in front of a burning house looking slightly too pleased with herself. And that image has been used many, many times to convey similar sorts of stories. This was one journalist, Mark DiStefano, using that meme to kind of convey a story about a footballer's wife who was being accused of leaking stories. Memes have been described as a tiny genre of text in themselves. They have their own rules, their own grammar, and each meme has their own rules. So it's kind of knowing about the particular meme. And also, is that a meme that's going to be meaningful to your audience? But they can be really interesting, really powerful. This one is my favorite. It's probably the one I've seen used most journalistically. It's called Distracted Boyfriend. And generally, you probably already know the rules of this particular meme, which is that you have a kind of a tension, a conflict between two items. And so this particular use of that meme by Jane Bradley, who works for I think it's for Washington Post now, the story that she's telling here was about a journalist who agreed with special forces to fake his own murder in order to entrap some particular people. And the way that she kind of looked at this story was, you know, you've got this special forces operation in which he fakes his own death. You've also got the fact that he had a wife and 6 kids who did not know that he wasn't dead. He couldn't involve them in this plan. So that was kind of an interesting dimension to that story, which she conveys in this meme. Here's another one. The UK test and trace system for tracking coronavirus used an Excel spreadsheet to track cases, and that meant that when cases hit I think it was 100,000 or something, they didn't realize that it stopped counting because it hit its limit. So they missed 16,000 cases. So the conflict at the heart of that story was that instead of using an actual database, they were distracted, if you like, by just going for the easy option of using Excel, causing this quite embarrassing mistake. And a final example, the police in the UK, a law was introduced or proposed about protecting statues. At the same time, the police was being criticised for not protecting women enough. And that kind of tension was illustrated through this meme as well. So this meme seems to be quite good for kind of illustrating tension, conflict, that's at the heart of a particular story. You might also be familiar with Downfall. Downfall is was a movie about Hitler's kind of last days, and there's a clip from this which has been used widely to illustrate kind of crisis situations. So this was an example in the slides, which I'll share later on SlideShare, where it's kind of telling the story of the last days of the British Prime Minister. So those are memes. The final type of visual journalism I want to cover, including some tools, is turning text into visuals. And this is probably the most simple way to get started with visual journalism. If you've got a key quote, if you've got a list of claims or achievements or time stamps, if you like, events that have happened, why not turn it into an image? That's what happened with this particular story with HuffPost. It makes it nice and shareable. It brings people into your story. Likewise, this particular example contrasts 2 quotes from the same person on learning lessons 5 years apart. Key figures can work really well as a visual. These images in the bottom right are from a BBC project called Go Figure. This was entirely social native, so this had no web presence. It was only on social media to begin with. They had a template in Adobe Photoshop, and each day they would pick a particular story. They would get a library image and a couple of key figures for that story. And they would share it on social media as a way of reaching underserved audiences that weren't visiting the BBC News website. Now, that proved so successful that they actually did create a page on the website where they would collect these every week. But primarily it was still a social first, social native piece of storytelling. And that's quite useful to kind of highlight, is that a lot of these visual storytelling techniques might only exist on social media. You might only use them to tell stories in a way that is entirely native to social media. Illustration has enjoyed a bit of a resurgence, a rebirth in recent years for the same reason. It makes things distinctive. You can use it to present quotes. As Molly Crabapple said at a conference a couple of years ago, sketchbooks can go where cameras can't. So in the same way that you get illustration used to illustrate court cases, because you can't take photographs, it's not just court cases where taking photographs might be problematic or even illegal. So sketching allows you to, or using illustrators allows you to tell stories that you might not actually be able to tell at all visually. And then you've got audio, which might be made visual. So this particular example is quite an extreme example because it's a full-blown piece of animation and illustration. It's a taped interview with Leonard Cohen, converted into a video by making it into a cartoon, essentially. Now, obviously, that's quite resource intensive, but it's an illustration of the principle that if you've got a bit of audio, you can turn it into a series of images instead. I'll just play a little bit of a clip so you can see what I'm talking about.
Under the spotlight, night after night or year after year, unless they have something to say or something new to disclose.
So you can see this is just audio, but it's been made visual. So let's finish with some techniques then and tools. Canva is probably the most widely used tool for creating images out of text. So if you have a quote in your story, that is something which you can make visual and use on social media, or use in the story itself as a form of illustration, as a way of bringing in readers who might not otherwise engage with your content. Key facts, key numbers also work really well in this respect. And Canva has lots of useful templates. It has the social media sizes built in. So if you want to make it for Facebook or for LinkedIn or whatever, it knows the sizes that you need to use. Giphy, as I said, Giphy is a library of GIFs that's used by many social and chat platforms, but it also has a number of tools online for creating GIFs and memes yourself. Giphy Capture is actually a piece of software that you can download to create screen captures and turn those into GIFs. As I said earlier, you can also use QuickTime if you're on a Mac. There will be Windows equivalent as well for screen capturing, and then you can convert that video to a GIF instead. Makeagif.com is one of many websites out there which will create GIFs for you. You can upload video clips to it. You can paste in YouTube URLs, and it will and tell it where you want to start and end, and it will create a GIF from that particular part of the video or from the video clip that you upload. You can also upload a series of pictures, and it will turn that into a GIF, or those into a GIF as well. GIFmaker.me does the same as well. In both cases, particularly with GIFmaker.me, you can specify how quickly it moves through the images, whether it kind of loops back and forth. So you can play with the settings to get the right sort of speed that you want. Sometimes, for example, if there's text on the images, then you might want it to move a little bit more slowly through them. If it's just photographic images, you might want it to move more quickly. But it's worth playing around with all settings when you create GIFs to get the right effect that you want. In terms of memes, Cheeseburger Meme Generator is one of a number of sites out there that allow you to create your own memes. It has a library of existing images that are used very often. So it's also a good way of kind of discovering what are these images and what do they mean. You can kind of have a look at other examples and start to get a feel for the rules of each particular meme and which ones might be appropriate to a particular story. Imgur, Meme Generator, those are similar as well. And then I mentioned Flourish earlier. Just to repeat that, the bar chart race graph on Flourish is a really good way to create animation and movement that you can then capture for an animated chart, a GIF. Obviously, not all data will suit a bar chart race. Basically, you need something which has data over a period of time, where things are kind of changing, the amounts of things are changing. So it's the most common examples include things like the numbers of goals scored by a number of people. The example I showed you there was the number of cases within particular age groups. And Flourish Stories allow you to animate transitions between different views on the same data. For example, different timescales, zooming into particular categories as well. And of course, you can capture interaction with interactive charts as well, using screen capture and create that as a GIF as well. So the key points that I kind of wanted to cover with all of this visual storytelling is that we have a number of new visual languages here, and each of them requires kind of learning that language. It's very easy to dismiss these languages if you don't know a lot about them, because from the outside, they might seem one-dimensional. Actually, there's a lot of complexity and richness and creativity if you're curious and you want to learn a new language. As you start to use these techniques, you should start to see new visual angles to your stories that you would otherwise miss. And it all boils down to this idea of showing, not telling. So, like I said, a key quote, a key fact in your story, that alone should be a visual angle to your story, something that can work on social media or something like Instagram, where you're trying to reach different audiences. Also, the emotional reaction that the story provokes, the people involved in it, the actors, things like that. It should give you a number of different ideas for visual angles. I've put a bunch of visual useful resources at the end of my slides. So there's some videos about creating social graphics and photo composition as well. But I'm going to move on to questions. Oh.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Can we suspend this slide sharing for a moment?
Yeah, you want me to go back to the slides?
No, okay.
Actually, what I would do.
No, I think you should stop sharing the screen.
Yeah, let me just go back to that. Hold on.
No.
There we go.
No, I think stop sharing the screen. So while we do that, while we figure out how to stop pause screen, I think we have lots of questions already. And but before, I would like Paul to take a break, catch some breath. And please, everybody, do tell us, do let us know. I just dropped the link in the chat box right now. And it's a quick survey regarding what you feel about this session, and we'd like to know your thoughts and pre and post this webinar. And while doing that, the link is in the chat box right now. I'm putting links up again. Everybody, please help us, let us know your thoughts around what you've learned. And if you have questions, I know we have a lot of questions already, but I would like to give one or two individuals the opportunity to ask your question live. So the best way for you to do that is to express your interest and raise your hand to do that. But once again, please the link I'm dropping in the chat. Just click it. It's a straightforward question, just 2 questions, and you are done with it. We really want to hear from you about it. Please do not hesitate to do that. And okay. Are
you able to see?
Yes. Yes. So please one last time, just click the link and go there. And while we do that, we have a number of questions already that I would like to Paul to take right now. And the first question, I think before I start displaying, is quite a valid one, which is around the concerns around accessibility. You know, when we have text to voice prompt on some platforms, which, for instance, if my SMS if an SMS comes in my phone and I have my headset on, I don't want to mention a brand name, so my phone is going to automatically read that text message. But it's quite interesting when there is somebody uses an emoji, when there is a component of emoji in that text message. So the prompt now, you know, translates it verbatim into crying emoji. It will be set to your hair. I'm not sure that is a good visual. That's a good user experience. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, I'm really glad that was asked, actually. I should have included that in the slides. I recently finished the new edition of the Online Journalism Handbook, and there's a lot of developments around accessibility in the last few years around, aside from emojis, in terms of things like images on Twitter and so on. So in terms of emojis, that's one reason why you shouldn't use a lot of emojis. So, you know, if you can imagine, if I take the example of Hugh Edwards with his Welsh flags, if that was read out by a screen reader, it would be Wales flag, Wales flag, Wales flag, Wales flag, Wales flag. So that's one reason not to use a lot of emojis as well. Another thing to be conscious of is an emoji won't always be described in the way that you assume. So you need to look up the emoji and the, I think it's called the Unicode description or something like that. There is a phrase that is used. So for example, the kind of praying hands or 2 hands together emoji, or actually an even better example, that the heart emoji is described as black heart, because originally there was no color, it was just a black heart. So so don't necessarily assume that your meaning can be conveyed through the description of the emoji, and do factor that in. So it should still make sense in terms of the text that associates with it, and it shouldn't be excessive. With images, generally, you should always include an alternative description. As I said, Twitter has made that a lot easier in recent years. Of course, once Elon Musk took over, he got rid of the entire accessibility team. So I'm not sure how well that's going to be maintained, but at least it is in there. And you will find similar accessibility features on LinkedIn and Facebook, I seem to remember. So always include an alternative description for images. And, you know, if you're putting a quote of a key fact or, an image of a key fact or an image of a quote, then that should be relatively straightforward, should be very straightforward. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question there.
Yeah, I think it does. And so we have, we'll now take a couple of questions. The first question is on the screen right now. How do you suggest approaching emojis without putting off a different message? Different generations may see the emoji as something different, like the eggplant emoji, for example. Yes, so how do you deal with this issue?
Yes, so I think again, this is about knowing your audience and making sure that your communication is unambiguous and clear and concrete. So, you know, these are the same rules that you would apply to any sort of writing. So, you know, if I've got a story about Nigeria and I use the Nigerian flag to indicate that, that's a very literal, concrete use of that emoji. There shouldn't be any room for misunderstanding there. And so I would steer clear, you know, things like eggplants and or aubergines, or, you know, peaches and things like that. You know, I would be aware of some of the ambiguities around those, and I'm trying to think. It'd be great if anyone has an example of something where something has been ambiguous, but, you know, don't don't be vague. It's just good writing practice in general. Always be concrete, and the same applies to emojis. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Would like to take a question from Semere.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. But
okay.
Okay, go ahead, please.
This is Samara from Ethiopia, East Africa. Thank you for the presentation, Paul. My question is, doesn't an emoji or GIF decrease the seriousness of the story? When you are reporting about dead people or people in trouble, doesn't the effect of emoji decrease the seriousness of the story or the content of the story? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and this is what I kind of touched on earlier in the presentation. I think if you don't know, if you haven't tried telling those sorts of stories using emojis, or you haven't looked at examples, then it can be easy to assume, well, this is a serious story, I can't use an emoji. So, and again, it's kind of an editorial judgment depending on the story. So, you know, yes, if people are, if there are people dead in a massive accident, then you might not use emoji. A lot of the time you wouldn't, but remember, emoji includes things like the red alert emoji. Now, the red alert emoji, the kind of, you know, warning type emoji, might be used for very, very serious stories, and that's absolutely fine. The warning sign is used in all sorts of very serious situations. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily rule it out entirely. I would think, first of all, you don't have to use emojis for every single story. And yes, there will be situations where there is no way of telling that story appropriately and sensitively with emoji. But equally, there might be some stories that you think are too serious, but actually a warning emoji or something like that might actually still be appropriate and serious. So yeah, I think it's using it in the right way and looking at as many examples as possible. Yeah, I should have included a warning sign example in my slides. I might add one before I put it on SlideShare.
Okay. Now we also For those that are joining us, I'm looking at our Facebook audience right now. If you're joining us on Facebook, please, we welcome your questions. Just put your questions in the chat box of the live stream that you're watching right now, and I'm going to take your questions. So Thomas, Aribisala, Rachel, and others that are watching, if you have any question, I'm looking at my chat box right now, and I will gladly ask Paul your question. So the next question that we have is on the screen, and it goes thus: how do you, I think it's still, you've started it, probably there's an additional thing you're going to want to make. How do you find balance between user engagement with emojis and GIFs and yet communicating your message? With falling attention spans, it seems that visual elements often distract the users or engages them on more superficial level.
Yeah, so there's a few things to say here. So first of all, remember that for a long time, women weren't allowed to read the news because they weren't seen as serious enough. It was thought that people would be distracted, right? The same applies to people with regional accents. Okay, so we've kind of gone through this process before. You know, ultimately, I don't like really TV news. I find TV news to be, you know, quite superficial compared to reading an article, okay? But I appreciate the fact that for a lot of people, reading an article is boring and the only thing that's going to engage them is TV news. So, you know, different types of journalism reach different people. And if your choice is between not reaching someone or reaching someone and them getting some of the story, but not necessarily the 1,500 word version of it that you prefer, I think I'd still prefer someone to get some of the story. I'd rather someone be aware that something was happening and informed a little bit than not informed at all. So, and it's interesting, we're talking about accessibility here as well. So, you know, by telling our stories in different ways, we are making it accessible to different people who have different literacies, who have different preferences, who consume information in different ways and in different places. So, you know, I appreciate the kind of, it's frustrating, you know, and it's disappointing. I would love everyone to read I'd love everyone to look at my Python notebooks and see how I did the story and, you know, the stuff that I find, look at all the work I did, but they're not going to do that. That's, you know, they're going to, it's why we have case studies in stories as well. We want to engage people on a human level. So, yeah, I think, yes, we have to be careful that we do it in a way that doesn't trivialize, that we do it in a way that doesn't mischaracterize or mislead. You know, ultimately, again, it's those journalistic principles of we need to be accurate, we need to be clear, and above all, we're doing it for a particular audience. We're trying to communicate something to a particular audience, and sometimes that means using a language that they can understand. That's why we translate jargon into plain language, but we always try to do it in a way that's not misleading.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we're back to the subject of accessibility. Are there any best practices for photos / post IDs, descriptions of visual content for visually impaired users? IDs are becoming more common in general on social, but I've yet to see widespread use by news media.
One really good point that I haven't mentioned is charts and alternative descriptions for charts and maps, for that matter, or diagrams. The advice here is that you shouldn't try to describe every single you know, bar in a bar chart or point on a map or whatever it is. Actually, when you write your alternative descriptions of a chart, you tell a story in the same way that really you should write a chart headline. So it might be something like a bar chart showing the numbers of cases of COVID by age group, The highest number is in the age group 20 to 29, followed by 16 to 20. The bottom age range is 30 to 40, right? So that would be, if you like, good practice in terms of alternative description. You're not saying bar 1 says this, bar 2 says that, bar 3, and it goes on and on and on. You are summing it up in terms of really what that bar chart is showing in general. What's the story that it's telling? So that's one thing to add to what I've already said about description, really. With quotes, you just need to include the quote, and with key facts as well. Really just always imagine, in a way, it's like writing for radio. You've got to imagine what you're writing is going to be read out loud. So it's got to make sense and be understandable when it's dictated orally, when it's, when a screen reader reads it out.
Thank you. We are making progress. I still want one more live question. So if you want to ask your question live, do indicate by raising your hand. And so the next question has to do with algorithmic influence. So do algorithms influence the amount of clicks we receive from memes or GIFs? And do they impose any limitation on usage? And I think you should also probably look at how do we track the number of people that are engaging with these tools.
Right. So the short answer is yes. One of the obviously we don't know the details of the specific details of how algorithms weigh every piece of content, but through various experiments we have a broad idea of what factors are taken into account and how when social media updates are presented to users, and which ones people see. And so, for example, the type of media in a social update is one factor that is taken into account. And so if an update is just text, it's less likely to be shown to someone than if it's got an image or a video. So we know that. So straight away, by adding images, we are increasing the chance that this is going to be seen by someone at all. Then there are other factors like, has it been shared by someone you know? Is it someone that you've interacted with, or an account that you've interacted with in the past? And so, there are other things you can do in terms of social media optimization to build a history of interaction. This is why you see a lot of questions asked on social media, a lot of use of surveys and polls, because if someone's had a history of interacting with your account, then it's more likely they're going to see your updates in future. And then whether other people have interacted with that particular piece of content as well. So unfortunately, this is why you see a lot of, this is why really there's been a rise in content that provokes strong reactions. People have learnt that making people angry or, in uproar is going to keep them seeing your content. So, but that applies to all kinds of interactions as well. In terms of there being a limit, no, I'm not aware of any kind of research or experiments that have indicated that the algorithms have kind of said, okay, that's too many images, I'm not going to show this person any more images now. And it is very much down to the individual and kind of what, if someone is clicking on a lot of images, they'll be showing more images. If they're clicking on a lot of videos, they'll be showing more videos. It's giving people what they appear to want.
Yes, so thank you. We go live to Ruby Daz. Ruby, where are you joining us from? And what's your question? Are you ready for us, Ruby? While Ruby gets set.
I'm aware I didn't answer about impact as well. How do you measure impact? One thing, obviously you can kind of track things like your traffic from your social media accounts and from other social media accounts. You can track that internally if it's going to your website. You can use links that can be tracked as well. So services like Bitly mean that you can track who's clicking on a link, regardless of whether that link has been shared on your account or someone else's account. You've obviously got your analytics from Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, which will tell you about interaction with your updates as well. So there are a number of ways of kind of tracking impact. The one thing I should emphasize as well is that a lot of what I've just mentioned relates to people clicking on a link that take them to a website. Now, that's not necessarily what you're looking to measure, because in some cases, these will be stories that, you know, you're telling a story on Instagram. You're not saying, here's a little bit of the story and you've got to go here to read the full story. Sometimes it is the story told in a different way. So, you know, try and measure on the platforms themselves as well, and think of that as a place for telling stories.
Ruby, are you ready to ask your question live? If Ruby is not ready, we go to the next question, which is, are you aware of any tool whereby you can embed a visual presentation into your web post, something that is more sophisticated than the traditional slideshow?
I mean, not really. I would imagine really what you'd end up with is a video. So you make a presentation, you screen capture that, or you film yourself. And ultimately that becomes a video on the platform. You know, there are different kind of presentation tools. So aside from PowerPoint and Google Sheets, you have, I've forgotten what it's called now, but there are others as well. Canva is now doing presentations, which is quite interesting because you can embed things like animated charts within Canva, because Canva brought Flourish. So Canva is probably worth looking at, but I'd kind of be careful of doing presentations in that kind of sense that you would do a presentation in a corporate setting, because it might not feel journalistic. It might not feel like a story. It might feel quite academic. It might feel quite corporate, and it might turn audiences off, particularly if it's quite long. So what you're looking to do is boil down what's essential about this story, what's engaging, what's interesting.
Thank you very much. Moving to the next question. How can one determine if emojis would undermine the effectiveness of a news piece?
Again, I think it comes down to that kind of, you know, why am I using emojis? Most of the time it's for succinctness. It's to communicate something quickly that that using words alone wouldn't be as effective doing. So, you know, if you're uncertain, try writing it with and without emojis, and, you know, show it to colleagues and see what they think. Even, you know, ultimately try both updates. Try one with emojis, try one without, and, you know, use A/B testing, see which ones get most engagement. That's one way of seeing what works. But ultimately, if it's, you know, like I said, you know, a story involving a lost puppy, for example, and you have a puppy emoji, that just instantly tells me what's in this story. If I read the word puppy, there's just that amount of cognitive work that needs to be done to kind of work out, oh yeah, that's a cute animal. I'm interested in this story. You know, that's quite a trite example, but what I'm trying to convey here is that there's a great example I meant to include in the slides, where there's a chart which has a big number that says, sorry, a big circle that says 25% on it, and a small circle that says 75% on it. And even though you can see the numbers, your brain reads big circle, big number, because your brain processes the images much more quickly than the text.
Okay, moving on. I think I also had this question. I'm really glad that somebody's raising it, which is the issue of copyright. You know, when you take a picture, you have to describe where you got it from. What insight can you give us around the legality of using these memes, the copyright laws that guide them, and how do we navigate this landmines, potential landmines.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad this was asked as well. Yeah. So, so the short answer is it's a grey area at the moment. We don't know. There's not been any kind of cases that give us a steer on this. But the one thing we do know is that memes have been used. Actually, there is one example which I'll come back to. But memes have been used, you know, by thousands and thousands of people. They are, in some cases, they're part of libraries like, you know, like ICANN has Cheeseburger, the Cheeseburger meme generator, like Giphy. Now, if those memes are in those libraries, then, and if someone was going to sue over them, they would sue those libraries and they would have sued them by now. So from a risk point of view, you know, I would say the risk is very tiny, but almost no risk. News organizations have used these. There's one in Denmark, TV2, which has used them very effectively on Instagram. And what they said basically is, you know, we kind of decided that the risk was there was, you know, there wasn't enough risk. So I'd kind of look at that in terms of what's the risk and what's the history here. Particularly because you're using it on social, you're also not necessarily making money directly from it. The one exception that I was thinking of was Downfall, the movie I mentioned earlier, this movie, German language movie about Hitler's last days. They did sue because it was getting used so much, and they basically kind of got it taken off YouTube for a while. And in a sense, I can't remember, I don't think anyone was sued in the sense that they had to kind of pay damages, but Downfall just told YouTube to take them all offline. And then they backtracked after a while, and it all came back on because I think they realized they were getting a lot of, you know, this film that really, very obscure film in the grand scheme of things, but was this really well-known film. I mean, so that's the only case I can think of. If you look at the Downfall copyright case, that's probably the only guide you've got. And they went after the platforms rather than individual users, as far as I know, but I might be wrong on that. I would check up on it, but yeah.
Thank you. I think we are making progress. So I'm combining two questions right now that I would like you to take at the same time. And I think because we see them, I'm looking at those two questions in two opposite ways. So the first question goes as, can only memes be used in an investigative storytelling? And the second question from another attendee is, are there any scenarios where visual storytelling is a big no?
So I think probably the answer to both of these questions is, you know, that there's no, generally in life, you know, there's no situation where you have to do something all the time, or you can never do something any of the time, you know. So, you know, I think memes can be used in an investigative story, and they cannot. They don't have to be. And likewise, you know, I think there are plenty of scenarios where you might decide, actually, I can't think of a way that visual storytelling would help me here. In the same way that there are stories where you would say, I can't really do this as a video, or I can't really do this as a podcast. It doesn't really work on radio, or it doesn't, you know, this is a medium of storytelling, and some stories will suit it well and some will not, just with TV, radio and text and interactivity and things like that. I think in an investigative story, it really depends on, you know, what the story is about. For example, you know, timelines are quite common in investigative stories. So that's something you might make visual. Timelines work quite well visually. Complex webs, you know, you can make complex webs visual. You can kind of show, you can map out the connections, key facts, key things that were said, key events. Those are all simple visuals. You might not end up with memes. You know, you might do a thread about it and use the thread emoji to indicate that you're about to do a thread. question mark to indicate that questions are raised. Those are very simple ways of just making it a little bit less dry. And I think with investigations, we're always tackling that challenge that we've got something that's really important, but there's a lot of detail and quite often a lot of complexity, but we want to make it accessible and to a wider audience who aren't knee deep in it like we are. So, we went on a quest is a common narrative technique in an investigation to try and engage an audience. So, things like that, the mystery, the question mark, the kind of key facts, installments in a thread, these are all things that we can make visual.
Yes, thank you very much. And so before I ask for your last words, there is a question that several individuals have asked repeatedly, and which is how they can access recording of this session. If you go to the chat box, I just dropped the link that takes you to the landing page for this Empowering the Truth Global Summit. And if you click the link, you will see the various sessions that we've been having. And as soon as this session is held, by the next day, the registration link prompt will have been changed to a prompt that allows you to watch the video. So please, that's a quick way for you to keep track of all the videos of the session. And yes, and so that's what I recommend. There's also another option that I'm going to share right now. But before we do that, we have Onye on the line. Onye Oranezi, would you like to ask your question live? Onye, you have the floor. I think Onye is changing her mind. Okay, so the other option, okay, if I can quickly demo what I'm trying to say. So once you click that link, this is the landing page that it's going to take you to. And once you're on this page, you can just, these are the sessions in the English forum. You can now easily watch, you can see the keynote session. You can just click the watch the recording of the keynote session. The session on creating viral video content, the video is here. And the session on deepfakes, you can just click this to watch the video. And this session that we are holding right now, this register now link will soon be replaced with a direct link that takes you to where the video is. And a quick shortcut to keep track of everything in one place is for you to go to the International Center for Journalists YouTube playlist. And once you click the video, you can, any of the videos, you can easily, I'm waiting for the username handle to show. You can easily click the username handle and it's directly.
Native AI in general, like masking object out and.
So I don't know why it's still delaying, but I think you have an idea what I'm trying to say. Okay, this is the link. Just click the International Center for Journalists YouTube username, and you are going to see all the videos. Just click this video. You can actually see all the videos right here. So that is one option. That's the option number 2 that you can take to access the videos from this session. And probably the easiest option that I would actually recommend is for you to be part of our Facebook forum, And in addition to where we usually share resources, insight tools, and links to opportunities and other things that we consider highly important for you. So this is the Facebook forum, and I'm going to put the link right now. I would also make it really, really easy for you to access. Just click the link that I just put right here, and you are going to easily access it. And many thanks to Paul. Paul has also shared the link to get to where you can get the slide, and later today. And now we are also going to download the slide, and we are going to package it to all the other previous lecturers' materials and send it out to everybody. So please, I recommend these are the links through which you can access us. And this page, Facebook forum page, is actually where we often share our resources. So thank you very much for that. And so I don't know whether we still want, whether Onye still wants to ask a question. Onye, do you, Onye, you have the floor if you want to ask your question. But if you're not asking the question, I would like Paul to give us what you think the take-home message from this session to be. If somebody is not getting anything, what do you think is the key message that our audience should go home with today?
I guess probably the key message is, in the last couple of decades, 20, 30 years ago, we were either a print journalist, or we were a TV journalist, or we were a radio journalist. And over the last couple of decades, we've all had to learn each other's craft. Print journalists have had to learn how to talk on podcasts and how to film video and take pictures. And this, visual storytelling is part of that. We're having to learn how to tell our stories in different ways. And it's, just look for it as much as possible when you're reading stories and you're looking at social media. Just look at ways that other journalists have told those stories visually, not just in the text forms or the broadcast forms that you might prefer, and see which audiences they're reaching.
Okay, thank you very much. So one of our attendees on Facebook wants me to pass their gratitude to you. Amaka says, really great session, and Prof gave practical answers too. And so thank you, and pass my gratitude to Prof. So that's from one of our forum members that watched the session on Facebook. And on behalf of the International Center for Journalism Ecosystem, and of course the planning organizers of these special series, I want to really appreciate you, Professor Paul Bradshaw, for joining us, for accepting our invitation, and for giving us practical examples, insights, and allowing us to start looking at the ways we create our content and engage our audience differently. So thank you very much for joining us today. And for all our attendees joining us from different parts of the world, we are really, really grateful that you've been able to take out time out of your very, very busy schedule to be part of this session. Many thanks. Thank you very much. And like we said at the big, we have grant opportunities at the end of this special series of webinars, which I believe is going to go a long way in empowering attendees to get more actively involved in introducing solutions, innovations, ideas, and unique approaches towards taking on disinformation, misinformation, and further empowering the truth. So probably by next week, I should be able to provide you with really, really full details on how to apply. And I encourage you to start thinking of something together. If you need to form a team, start looking at who you can work with to really implement and put together your application. And I'm really, really excited and looking forward to what you're going to come up with. So next week, we have another truly highly important session, which is, today we've talked, and last week we've been talking around synthetic media, pictures, videos. Next week we go to audio, and the goal of next week's session will be on how to create viral podcasts. And we'll be joined by Pradma Pia, who is the co-founder of Suno India, a top leading podcast and podcast projects, a massive project with different programs in India. And I'm really, really excited to to Oster, and we'll be glad for you to be able to join us. So if you've been looking, if you are an audio specialist or you are really interested and you believe that audio is a unique approach that you would like to actually engage in or venture into, I encourage you to join us next week for this really, really important session. And it is also important that you register. You have to particularly register for that session. So please look at the disarming disinformation link that I put up. Just scroll up to the link and go to that specific session and click on it. A lot of people have already registered for that session, and if you've not registered, please do so. And we hope that you are going to. It's going to be really, really fun. And yes, Paul Bradshaw is leading an MA course at Birmingham City University, and I think the link is up too. And wherever resources and insight that you want to have, please let me know. If you would like to connect with Paul after this session, you know how to reach me. Just send me a message and I'm going to facilitate it. We are really glad to make this network work, and we believe that these are necessary for this profession and for the betterment of all our forum members. And to learn more about this ICFJ's Pamela Howard Forum on Global Crisis Reporting, I encourage you to check out the International Center for Journalists website on www.icfj.org. And International Journalist Network is filled with opportunities, information, and resources on different topical issues that are relevant for journalists. So please check out International Journalist Network's website on www.ignet.org. And from me and the entire members of ICFJ's team behind this project, I say thank you very much for joining us. And enjoy the rest of the day, and it's bye from me. I'll see you next week, same time, and take care. Enjoy the rest of the day. Paul, have fun, and bye. Oh, Paul, you have disappeared. Oh, it's okay, you can disappear. I'm already closing the show. So bye, everyone, and have fun.